right, Palmer, you know it's coming. So
Quarterbacks.
yeah, we're going to talk quarterbacks. Man, you were right on it. Okay. So the way I look at this Kentucky game is that these two teams could still be on the field on Wednesday night for a Saturday game. And I don't know that the Wildcats would still maybe have 3 points on the board. They just weren't going to score against Georgia's defense. They just weren't moving the ball. Joey Gatewood at quarterback. Okay. So it looked like there might have been an opportunity to experiment, and whether that means going in one of two directions. Either one direction would be play multiple quarterbacks, see who looks the best. We don't know what's going on in practice. We don't know. Maybe Stetson Bennett is by far the best quarterback in regards to not just throwing the football, but doing all the other things that a quarterback needs to do to lead the team, to get them in the right play, to make the right decisions. Okay, it's a different position than any other position in so many ways. But there was that opportunity. We know DeJuan Mathis got the first game start, got less than a half, didn't perform well, but still it was less than 2 quarters of play. Carson Beck, I don't know what the deal is with him. I don't know what the deal is necessarily with JT Daniels at this point. So either it could have been an audition for the Florida game, or it could have been Stetson Bennett, let's have you throw more than 13 passes this game and work on the passing game because we're probably going to need it next week.
Yeah, Kirby Smart, was asked specifically about that after the game. I think it was, one of the most, straightforward questions he's received about the quarterback situation all year. And, it was, is Stetson your guy? What is it that you see in Stetson that is, the deciding factor between him and those other guys that you mentioned? And also, how confident are you in the offense? Every week Kirby is going to be asked about the quarterback play and the quarterback situation. And so, he's been asked it every which way that it could have been asked. And this was very straightforward. And, he said Stetson is our guy. He's said that Stetson is going to continue to be the guy until, one of those guys that you mentioned, be it DeJuan Mathis, JT Daniels, or Carson Beck, steps up and shows that they deserve a shot to be the guy. I don't necessarily agree with him. I would have liked, like you said, an audition type game. I would have liked to see exactly what, DeJuan Mathis could do in a second opportunity. Exactly what JT Daniels could do in his first opportunity in his Georgia uniform. So I think that a lot of the fans would agree with me here and, say that they wanted to see someone else. I think, we've seen what Stetson Bennett could do, and we've seen it in on the highest of stages against Alabama. I think it's pretty clear what Georgia is with Stetson Bennett. And I think, like you said, there was an opportunity to kind of play around with it. But, the danger you run there is you take out Stetson Bennett. Does he lose all of his confidence? And I don't know how much confidence he has left, given the fact that in the last 6 quarters of play, he's thrown 4 interceptions and fumbled the ball several times. Given against Alabama, they were held scoreless in the second half and only put up 14 points on Saturday against a Kentucky team that's not the best in the league. I think that there's a lot to be desired to see out of this quarterback situation, but ultimately Kirby Smart said that Stetson is the guy, and that they really felt like they didn't have to throw the ball Saturday. You play these games to win. You play to win the game, and you kind of scheme a game the way that it's going to work. With the way that Kentucky was limiting possessions, Georgia only had 8 possessions there. You want to find your way into the end zone, be it throwing, passing, and when the run game was working, Zamir White had a career high carries, turned that into a career high 130 something yards. When that's working and you've got the running backs clicking, another guy that was clicking was James Cook, who had over 100 all-purpose yards for his second straight game. When you've got those guys and you've got that running back room working, I don't see a reason to turn away from it. But I definitely am with you that, it would have been interesting to see, some of those other guys get a chance, or even see Stetson Bennett air the ball out. Certainly interesting to go from him throwing the ball 40 times against Alabama to 13 times, like you said, against Kentucky. So I think a lot of that has to do with the way that both those games played out. Alabama, they're playing from behind, and they've got to go to the air to get some points, whereas this Kentucky game was slower on the ground and really ultimately about eating up clock and getting in the end zone a couple of times that you needed to win the game.
So when looking at Florida's struggles this year on defense, they have flipped the script in regards to having a top 10 or 15 defense during this McElwain, Muschamp, and into Dan Mullen's tenure. And then suddenly this year, they're getting shredded week by week. But then they run up against Missouri, who's been throwing the ball well. They seem to have fixed some issues, made some personnel changes. First touchdown was on special teams or defense for Mizzou. Second touchdown didn't matter. Game was over. So they might have righted some wrongs on defense. So as you look at Florida personnel, as you look at whatever sample size you've been able to see the Gators play, I saw some of the Ole Miss game. I saw them play pretty much every play against Texas A&M. Your thoughts about the Gators and maybe what they bring to the table that might be a little bit different here in 2020 than what it's been the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that Missouri game being better for Florida. They got a couple of guys back that they haven't had all this season. So, I think that when you get a defense like that, that has struggled, and you get a couple of those key players back, that certainly brings some energy to your team, and I think that showed against Missouri. But I do think it's tough to read a defense based on one game, and you look at the larger sample size, and they haven't been all that great. So I definitely think this game is going to be interesting to see. Once again, you look at that Georgia-Alabama game, and it was strength versus strength. Alabama's offense versus Georgia's defense. That's going to be the case here with Florida and Georgia. And then the weaknesses, obviously, on the other side of the ball, with Georgia's offense struggling a little bit, especially at the quarterback position, and Florida's defense struggling, giving up a bunch of yards. I think it'll be interesting to see how Georgia game plans against former Georgia defensive coordinator.
If it swings Florida's way, it's going to be because they're throwing the ball all over the place. Kyle Trask has been extremely efficient. The wide receivers, led by Kyle Pitts, of course, a tight end, but plays like a wide receiver. Kadarius Toney is making moves on everybody in the open field. It's going to be that Florida's too explosive for Georgia, and Georgia's offense, the way it's running right now, won't be able to keep up. What we've seen the last 2 years on the flip side would be that Florida's gotten better and better and better, but Georgia still is more talented and deeper from top to bottom on the roster, and just flat out stronger along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And especially when we hit the fourth quarter in a close game, Georgia was able to push Florida around. The Gators couldn't balance out their passing attack with any type of threat running the ball, and that's usually not a formula for winning against a good team, having to throw it 50 times and gaining like 25 yards rushing. And then on the flip side, that Georgia was just able to pound and pound and pound, and those talented backs got more room in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think the last 14 games between these two teams has been decided on the ground, and the team that has rushed for more yards has won the game. So I definitely think this one starts in the trenches, and like you said, Georgia has a little bit of an advantage on the offensive and defensive lines this year, and they have in the past. That is definitely going to be tested this Saturday with a banged up defensive line for Georgia, several injuries on the defensive front for the Bulldogs. Starts in the middle with Jordan Davis, Big 99, as Kirby Smart likes to call him. He's been a force in the middle for Georgia. Played a big role in this game last year, stopping that run, and has always played a big role for stopping the run for Georgia. So he goes down last weekend against Kentucky with an elbow injury. It looked like he was going to be out initially, for a couple of weeks. Our sources indicated that he would be out, but Kirby Smart has been really optimistic. I think it'll be interesting to see how much of that is coach speak versus how much of that is realistic. And to see if Davis is able to go in any capacity. It's an elbow injury, so with it being upper body, it's one of those things that you can kind of limit it and protect it when you're playing a football game. It's hard to keep an ankle away from contact, hard to keep a knee away from contact. But, when you can put a brace on an elbow, you can protect it a little bit. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he goes. I would not expect him to play. And that becomes even bigger when Georgia is down Julian Rochester in the middle as well. So two big defensive linemen that can play in the middle of that defense for Georgia. And so their depth on the defensive front is certainly going to be tested.
Yeah. So what is the injury count on defense? I heard 5. I heard both starting safeties.
Yeah. So Lewis Seen is going to be back. All indications point to him playing. He left the Kentucky game early as well. Looked like something having to do with a shoulder, possibly. But he has been practicing this week. He's been in a full go jersey, not wearing a black non-contact jersey or anything. So he looks like he'll be ready to go. Georgia will be without All-American safety Richard LeCount, who was involved in a scary automobile accident over the weekend after the win over Kentucky. He was named SEC Defensive Player of the Week with 13 tackles, career high for him against the Wildcats. And then Saturday night, once the team got back to Athens, he was involved in a motorcycle accident. And so that was a scary situation. He was in the ICU for a little bit. He's out. He appears to have concussion and bruised ribs. So likely will be out for a couple of weeks for Georgia, but obviously that's not the priority there with the situation like that. And so good to have Richard back in the building with the team today. And thoughts and prayers are with him. But and on the field, that'll mean that Georgia will be down one of their starting safeties and one of their most veteran players on the defensive side of the ball. So likely will be Chris Smith stepping up there at safety. He got a lot of the action in the Auburn game when LeCount went down with the targeting injury, targeting foul. So he was out for the later portion of the first half and all of the second half in that game. So Chris Smith has filled in. He's been making a push for playing time and actually played against Kentucky with Seen out. So, he's a veteran guy, junior, that, has the experience and is definitely capable of leading a defense back there. So Georgia will be without one of their safeties, Quay Walker, who's an inside linebacker, probably a third linebacker for Georgia, but definitely in the rotation. He's been limited. He's been a non-contact jersey. So, we'll see if he gives it a go. Monty Rice, who has been limited with a foot injury, he is a full go. So I would expect him to play. Talking to some of the players today, they told us that Monty gave them a little bit of a speech today, let them know how important this game is. And so, I think when a guy like that, a defensive leader, one of your, presumably one of your team captains at the end of the season, gives a speech like that, you can expect him to give it a go. He gave it a go against Alabama when he was limited. Didn't really look like he was going to play much against Kentucky coming off of the bye and getting a little bit more rest. But when Quay Walker went down, they needed him to step in, and he stepped in and played well in that game. So Georgia's going to be down a couple of defensive guys, but like you said, the depth that they've built up with the recruiting is certainly going to be tested and will be on the forefront today on Saturday.
Yeah, it's always a good one between Georgia and Florida, always a huge rivalry. But again, this has been for the SEC Eastern Division, and unless all hell breaks loose in the rest of the season for these two teams, and it's not going to, this is for the division championship and a right to play Alabama in Atlanta. Palmer Tom's on the line. We would encourage you to check out his work at Dogs 247 Sports. And anything that we're missing here, anything of note, anything you find interesting as we get closer to game time, let's see, in less than 3 days.
Yeah, I think, ultimately we touched on it with Georgia's injury situation. That's who Georgia trots out there is going to be the biggest question. And I think a lot of people have been wondering who Georgia's going to trot out there at quarterback all season. I think that one's pretty firm answer, that it's going to be Stetson Bennett, and that, Kirby is pretty set in stone on Stetson being the guy. And so I think, looking at this matchup, it's going to come down to who Georgia can trot out there on defense and can they get the stops that they need. Obviously the struggles against Alabama were very apparent against an explosive offense like that. And this is an explosive offense, but it's a different kind of explosive offense. It doesn't have the speed that Alabama has, at least across the board. Kadarius Toney is obviously a very, dynamic player and quick guy that Florida fans love. It'll be interesting to see who Georgia matches up against him. I would guess it's probably going to be Eric Stokes, but Tyson Campbell is another guy that can match up one-on-one in coverage with the speedster like that. But I think the biggest question is going to be how Georgia matches up against Kyle Pitts. And, obviously that becomes even more of a question when you look back at last year's game. Their one answer to Kyle Pitts, and it wasn't much of an answer. They really struggled to guard him in the first half. But when they did guard him well, it was Richard LeCount on him. So without LeCount there, they're going to have to get some pressure on the quarterback. They weren't able to do that against Alabama. And, it'll be interesting to see how they can do that without some of their best defensive linemen in the mix. So certainly looking forward to this game. Like we've said several times, I think it's going to decide the East, and should be a great matchup between two great teams on Saturday.
We appreciate everyone's comments and questions in the live chat. I don't see anything else necessarily here for Palmer. A lot on Stetson Bennett. We've addressed the quarterback situation, so we'll let Palmer have the rest of the night off. Palmer, we appreciate you stopping by as always, sir. Georgia, Florida is always a good one. Enjoy the game.